He turned water into wine, I turned whiskey into songs. Too many second chances, too many too far gones. Gave me grace along the way, took my heart and led me home. Don't you see, it's a God thing for me. Now I write songs about the heartland. My heartland's in Tennessee.
Welcome to the Heartland Journal podcast with Steve Abramowitz, editor-in-chief of heartlandjournal.com.
Welcome to our very special Heartland Journal Summer Series, where we have dug deep into the archives and unearthed some of our most popular and even controversial shows of the past, many that haven't seen the light of day in years. We hope you enjoy what we have in store for you. Until I return to my post as host of the Heartland Journal podcast, this is Steve Abramowitz wishing you a safe and sane summer. And as always, glory to God. Howdy, y'all. Welcome back. I'm Steve Abramowitz, and this is the Heartland Journal podcast. On this show, we are focused on our nation today with always an interesting person making a positive change in our community and lovers of truth. And welcome to our People in the News episode, where I interview people who are making an impact and are lovers of truth. Today, we are talking with White House correspondent for Today News Africa, Simon Ateba. Simon Ateba runs the online news outlet Today News Africa, covering President Joe Biden, Vice President Kamala Harris, U.S. government, UN, IMF, World Bank, and other financial and international institutions in Washington and New York. He was born in Cameroon, proficient in 5 languages, French, English, Iwando, Mankwisa, and Yoruba. I hope I got those right. Ateba worked for The News magazine in Nigeria for 9 years. He appeared in the documentary Nigeria's Millionaire Preachers about religion becoming a big business in Nigeria in 2011. By then, Ateba had investigated the link between religion and money in Nigeria for about 5 years and had been beaten up at least once during those investigations. On August 28, 2015, he was arrested by Cameroonian authorities and accused of spying for Boko Haram as he investigated the living conditions of Nigerian refugees camped in the country's north. Ateba was based in Lagos, Nigeria, and had traveled to Cameroon after receiving a grant from the International Center for Investigative Reporting in Abuja to investigate the ordeals and suffering of Nigerians who had fled to Cameroon following Boko Haram attacks on their communities. He was released after being detained for 4 days. Ateba's arrest and detention were condemned by the Cameroon Journalism Trade Union. In December 2021, Ateba questioned Jen Psaki about the Omicron-linked travel ban President Biden imposed on 8 African nations, and in March 2022, he asked the White House for comments on the Will Smith-Chris Rock slapping incident at the 2022 Academy Awards ceremony. In December 2022, Ateba had a tense exchange with Karine Jean-Pierre at the White House. On March 3rd, 2023, Ateba stated on Twitter that he had been denied membership in the White House Correspondents Association. He shared the text of a letter in which the organization said they could not verify his employment at any news organization that regularly covers the White House and cites issues with his behavior in the briefing room. On March 20th, 2023, Ateba shouted at Karine Jean-Pierre during a press conference that included the cast of the comedy series Ted Lasso. Ateba claimed that Jean-Pierre had discriminated against him by not calling on him during her 7 months tenure as White House press secretary. In response to Ateba's behavior, the White House press office sought to tighten rules governing the issuance of so-called hard passes, which allow reporters like Ateba to enter White House grounds without prior permission. Hello, Simon. How are you today?
Good. Thank you for having me. And I can see that you did a lot of research and, read a lot of things about me. Actually, I want to say something first before we start. Okay. Is I like the way you struggle to call Abuja in Nigeria. And that makes me feel good because, as you know, I was born outside the US and I tried to get your accent. I tried very hard and I failed and I realized I can't really do that. And one day I decided to be me and have my accent and just speak, the way I'm used to.
I like the sound of it very much, but thank you for coming on with me to share your story. You picked a wild time to be covering the White House in DC, I must say. Do you enjoy it?
Yeah, so I am, but today was the most dishonest press briefing I've attended in the past 3 years. As you know, today the White House released the assessment review for the withdrawal from Afghanistan in August 2021. And, they blame the former President Trump, they blame everyone, they blame even justified intelligence failure and didn't really take any responsibility. And it was really shameful to watch it. But yeah, apart from the lies and the propaganda and other things, I love being at the White House. It can be really competitive, and I love being there.
That's great. So, curiosity, you don't see Joe Biden in the Oval Office too often. Is he even there in the last couple years while you've been there?
Yes, he is. And you see him in different places, when he's leaving, maybe going for an event and come to the South Lawn, and you see him, and you see him when he's receiving foreign heads of state. And so he's there in the White House, but I don't get the access that everyone else has because of some of the things that you mentioned, just doing my job, asking tough questions, and trying to also remind them that since they are trying to expand ties between the US and Africa, I need to be able to ask questions.
Yeah, I want to talk about that for sure. But, I read your bio straight from Wikipedia. Are there inaccuracies in there still, or did they get corrected? Because I know there was a lot of falsehoods.
Yeah, so many things there, even the tone. Most people who wrote those things, I suspect they were like left-leaning guys. And they used to write very bad things about me there on Wikipedia. Once I have maybe a clash or disagreement with Jen Psaki or Karine Jean-Pierre, they will add really bad things there. I'm not proficient in Yoruba, the other language. I speak Mangisa, Ewondo, English, French, but I don't speak the last one. And also they tried to reduce my journalism career to, in March, he asked this question. And, I have 2 degrees in journalism. I've done only one thing, just journalism. I've been arrested in Cameroon while doing, as they say, an investigative report on Nigerian refugees in Cameroon. I've been attacked on the Gulf of Guinea with an AK-47 to my head. Wow. I've been kidnapped in Nigeria, dumped in the woods and left for dead and survived. So I've gone through all those things, but I became a better person. I've written thousands of articles, worked in different places, worked across West Africa. I used to cover the U.S. Embassy in Lagos, Nigeria. I've seen many ambassadors there. And even in Washington, D.C., I've covered from the IMF, the World Bank, various government agencies, the State Department, the WHO, the UN, they praise me a lot because I ask really serious questions, do serious articles, and have done that for years. It's not 1 year, not 2 years, not 10 years, more than that. And so you can't reduce my journalism career to, in March 2022, he asked this question. And
right. 3 questions to 2 different press secretaries. Would you consider yourself conservative by American standards or liberal? Because obviously the liberal press secretaries, and they prove themselves to be such, she's now working for MSNBC, aren't taking to you very kindly. So do you think they chafe at your conservative leaning politics, or is it just
actually we didn't used to be. We used to be very liberal, like maybe 2-3 years ago, when candidate Joe Biden ran against President Trump. Our publication endorsed Joe Biden.
Wow.
And we explained, because, the New York Times had told us about racism. And they've told us, this guy called Africa S-hole country, and,
right.
And he's a racist, and he did this. Back then, we didn't know that while the New York Times was quick to point those things out. They were not as quick to point Hunter Biden and the China and all the other things that Joe Biden and the rest could have done. And so we couldn't see ourselves back then endorsing Trump because it was like, they tell you this guy is a bad guy. And so we endorsed Joe Biden, and then I began to cover the White House full time. I used to be there when President Trump was there, but it wasn't full time. When there's something important, I would go to the White House.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Only for me to get to the White House and, begin to face discrimination and see that they were not treating us the same way, even though that was the White House where, we expected to be treated well because, this was a good guy. He just replaced the bad guy. And he was the guy who cared for, the little guy and the blacks and the minorities. And I didn't see that in that White House.
Yeah. How did you get the White House correspondence job? I mean, I know you own the paper, but how did you get that from what you were doing? And what was your journey like getting to DC?
So it was really tough before I began to cover the White House. I used to be very popular at the IMF and the World Bank and the UN because, those were international organizations. Usually when we have, like next week, we're having the US, the World Bank, IMF summit and meetings, spring meetings that will take place here in Washington, D.C. And I used to be this guy who was doing a great job. All of them used to congratulate me. None of them was actually subscribing to our paper. They used to tell us, you guys are doing such an amazing job. They will share our stories and, being read by thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people. But we used to tell them, yeah, you congratulate us for years. We are growing old. I'm beginning to have some gray hair. You guys are not subscribing to our paper. And then I realized we were not the only one. Everywhere we work, people used to do that. Even the US Embassy across Africa, we used to really do a great job for them, made sure their message got to the people, and they used to also congratulate us. But, they were not really subscribing to our paper. Everyone was using us, but I realized that they didn't really care about the people who were actually helping them to do their own job.
Yeah.
And then, so I kept doing that for years. We kept improving our publication. We trained interns across US universities. During summer, most of them will come. We pay them with our own money. A lot of them used to come from California. I don't know why, but it was really interesting to see how the time difference. It used to be like 3 hours behind us, and I need to wake up and say, hey, we need to have meetings with people on the East Coast. And so I did that for years. That's after having worked in Nigeria for almost 10 years and having done these things in the US for almost 3 years. When President Biden came to power, we decided to now cover the White House because, he was the good guy. He was trying to strengthen ties between US and Africa. He was this guy who had all the answers. And so that's how we decided to cover the White House. We began the application process, and we were able to see that that's the only thing that I've done in my entire life. I've not done anything else. First degree in journalism, second degree in journalism, had that career that you just talked about. So I was as qualified. Actually, I was more qualified than most people covering the White House. What I realized when I got to the White House was many people who cover the White House don't know many things. For instance, how do you sustain a publication? How do you make it profitable? How do you make money? How do you keep ethics? And how do you even get to understand the whole technology behind, the publication? Who are the people who code? I had to realize that we had to employ people in Malaysia, in India, in different places to do some technical aspect on the website, because journalism was changing, the video, the audio, different things. And so I began to cover the White House full time during President Biden. I used to come during President Trump, but now the good guy was there, and I began to go to the White House every day. And I used to stand in the White House. I would raise my hand and after 3 or 4 months, without getting any question, I went to Jen Psaki's office. I asked her, hey, I've been standing there 3 months. You guys are trying to improve ties between US and Africa. I'm the guy. Give us one question once in a while. We don't expect to get a question every day. And she said, what do you want me to wear? Because, I'm so black, maybe I need to wear maybe a white bubu or anything Senegalese. And she would say, no, you don't need to wear anything. I will give you a question. Then she will come to the briefing room and she will spend another 2 months. She won't give me any questions. And then one day she called on me and I asked a softball question. I asked her if those who have said that President Biden who have nicknamed him Sleepy Joe, are wrong because I'm seeing him do his job. And she liked me. She was like, oh my God, we have a friend in the briefing room. So she began to give me a question once in a while. And then in November 2021, the US banned 8 African nations over the Omicron variant. 6 of those nations had 0 cases of the variant. At the same time, the variant was in Japan, in Hong Kong, in UK, in Europe, everywhere, and they didn't ban them. When I challenged her, she became really upset because, she knew Simon was this good guy. When I went to her office before then, they used to call me, our friend has come. All of them is our friend Simon. I wasn't doing my job. That's why they were calling me my friend, our friend. But once I asked her a serious question, she got upset. She treated me really badly. And from there, our relationship has not been stable.
Wow. So on a side note, since you live there now, what do you think of the conditions in the city of DC and the political climate in the capital versus, say, places you've had guns held to your head in Nigeria and whatnot?
So, the US is still a better place. There's crime in DC. It's increasing. It wasn't like that like 3 or 4 years ago. It was last year that was attacked for the first time in DC in broad daylight. Someone just came and hit me. And
oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's happening a lot. Crime is up, but it's still less than the conditions in Nigeria. In Nigeria, you have so much traffic jams and you don't have the metro, the subway, for you to get home quickly. So this is still like a more advanced, more
modern city.
And so that's great. And then the weather also changes. In Nigeria and most places in Africa, it's usually hot for a very long time, like in Miami every day, and you don't have electricity all the time. So it's hot outside, it's hot inside. It can be crazy. But I would say that things are changing in DC. Crime is up. Things that I didn't used to see before. We are also noticing a lot of homelessness around the White House. We have tents, people moving in. So it's getting a bit crazy.
Yeah. So for people that don't know, the James S. Brady press briefing room has only 49 seats. And the press secretary is free to choose which reporters to call on, of course, although TV networks and other large news outlets who sit at the front typically get called on more regularly. The first question traditionally goes to the Associated Press. Kind of a lame tradition, I guess, but they do. Used to be Helen Thomas who got the first question, but she passed away, I think. And you said, even as President Biden is about to receive 50 African heads of state in DC for the U.S.-Africa Summit, she didn't give us even a single question. I've been trying for the past 3 months. What does she, being Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre, have against you?
I don't know. Let me ask you a question. If you're the spokesperson of the president, and the president is receiving 50 African leaders in Washington, D.C. for the U.S.-Africa Leaders Summit, as President Biden did last December, only the second time. The last summit and the first one took place in 2014 when President Obama was in power. And for those who are listening, Africa has between 54 and 55 countries, depending on who you ask, the UN or the AU. So when you have 50 African leaders in Washington, D.C., what that means is you have almost the entire continent, the leaders of the entire continent of Africa in Washington, D.C. Yet the person covering the White House for the U.S., for U.S.-Africa relations, is not allowed to ask a question. Just a week before then, President Biden received the French president, and it was a big visit, it was a state visit. And the French journalists who were in the briefing room were allowed to ask multiple questions. And, it was crazy to see that one president comes and they give the French journalists multiple questions, and the African journalist who is there cannot even ask a question when the president is receiving 50 African leaders. And it wasn't just that. The vice president just returned from Africa. She went to 3 countries. She went to Ghana, Zambia, and Tanzania. Yet the African covering the White House wasn't allowed to ask a question in the Biden White House. And that's not all. The First Lady, Jill Biden, just returned from Africa. Yet the African covering the White House wasn't allowed to ask the White House a question about the First Lady's trip to Africa. The Secretary of State just went to Ethiopia, went to Africa, yet the guy covering the White House isn't allowed to ask them a question. And as you know, one of the biggest humanitarian crises at the moment is not in Ukraine, it's in Ethiopia's Tigray region. The White House says that 600,000 people have died dead since 2021, since the war started in 2020, between 2020 and 2021. Millions of people have been displaced. And, no one is giving you the opportunity to ask those questions. And this is happening as China is expanding influence across Africa. Russia is expanding influence across Africa. It was so bad that last February, when Russia invaded Ukraine, there was a vote in March in the UN, and the US realized they didn't have the support of the African nations the way they used to have. So in August last year, the Secretary of State traveled to South Africa to unveil the new US-Africa policy. And they had the US-Africa Leaders Summit last December. Yet, even as they tried to do that, the African guy covering the White House is not allowed access, respect, and, the opportunity to ask questions.
Wow, that certainly sounds like a lot of personal bias,
Yeah, to conclude, yesterday, the vice president, because she just returned from Africa, had an event to discuss her trip in Africa. I applied they sent me an email to apply to attend the event. I wasn't allowed to attend the event here in Washington, D.C. to discuss Africa.
Wow. Well, that's crazy. She looks like she's in pictures at least about 4 feet tall. Is that accurate?
Yeah, she's not tall enough. I'm not that tall. I'm 5'5", so I'm taller than her. So
definitely in over her head. No pun intended, or maybe intended. Okay. So John Kirby said Biden was proud of the Afghanistan withdrawal that killed many people. He fills in sometimes when KGP is absent. Is he any better?
No, he's not. Yeah, so no, he's not. So that was today, because as I said, the White House has released the assessment review of the withdrawal from Afghanistan. They were trying to see the lesson that they can learn, what went wrong, who missed what. And so today at the press briefing, John Kirby, who is one of the top spokesperson at the White House National Security Council, he comes to the White House briefing room often, more often than the previous people who occupied that office used to. And, he blamed the former President Trump for the withdrawal. He blamed him for reducing the number of troops to 2,500. He almost blamed him for the the massive intelligence failure that preceded the withdrawal in August of 2021. As you know, President Biden came to power in January 2021, and he had 8 solid months before the withdrawal. And so in the White House, many correspondents asked him, why didn't you change it? I mean, Trump was gone. You were the president, and you could have increased the number of troops. Actually, your commanders didn't even want you to withdraw the way you withdrew. And so it was a very dishonest press briefing today in the White House.
Wow. Well, right now you are the voice of Africa in the U.S., and I can confirm that the level of discrimination against me, you said, and against African journalists in the White House is astounding. It's disrespectful. It's disgraceful, you said. It's not lost on me that she is also African American. Why does she single you out? Why do they all single you out?
Yeah, I think, yes, right now I'm the voice of Africa in the US. Even the vice president, after attending that event that she attended yesterday, people got to know about the event because I tweeted about it. So even when they don't want me to attend the event, if I tweet or write a story about it, that's how most people get to know. The US Africa Leaders Summit that took place in December, people got to know, most Americans got to know about the summit because I went on Tucker Carlson's show and I talked about the summit. People didn't know what was going on. They didn't even know there was a summit that was taking place in Washington, D.C. I don't know why she's discriminating against me. I think when you do your job, when you ask tough questions, or you try to ask tough questions, and you try to also let them know that, hey, I may be from Africa, but I have experience. I know my job. I've done this my entire life. And, don't look down on me. I can ask you questions. And it wasn't just me. There were other Africans who used to come, and we used to go grab coffee after briefings. And we used to say ourselves, she's been more discriminatory against us than the white lady who was there before us.
Oh my gosh.
The white lady was Jen Psaki. And so we couldn't believe it. Like, even when the president is about to receive 50 African leaders, we go to her and say, hey, we will send emails and say we would like to have an interview with the president, maybe 5 minutes. Just ask him, what do you, about the summit, just to give us that respect and the opportunity to also be able to ask the president 1 or 2 questions and then share it across Africa, ahead of the summit. And yet, they won't even bother to respond to us. That's how the level of disrespect. And also in the briefing room, what you realize is, it's not just me that she's disrespecting. She's disrespecting the entire continent. And it's not just the briefing room. For everyone who covers the White House, we do a lot of background calls. John Kirby, you asked me a few minutes ago if he was any better. He's not. He does a lot of background calls, including on Africa. And during those background calls, they don't call on any African on the call, even when they're discussing the vice president going to Africa for the first time.
Wow.
It's crazy. So I don't know why.
So Karine Jean-Pierre abruptly ended a White House press conference after getting into what they call a shouting match with you. You said, I'm an immigrant, and she doesn't like that. Do you believe that?
Yes. I see how she treats other people. Yeah. She wishes them happy birthday. She comes to the briefing room and someone is seated on my right side. I'm raising my hand and she calls on the person on my right who doesn't raise their hand. And the person will tell them, I don't have any question. And she'll be embarrassed. And I will share the video to show people that this was happening. Yeah. I'm raising my hand. The guy is on my right side, not raising their hand, not requesting to ask questions. And she will rather call on the person who has no question, not raising their hand, than the person who is raising their hand. And
it's really unbelievable, actually. I mean, if you Google Simon Ateba, you get Press Secretary KGP, or you used to. Is that still the case? Do you know?
No, they've changed it. So
They changed it.
they changed it. Yeah, it is
Um,
crazy to be discriminated against. And when after 7 months and you raise your voice and you look bad on TV, people just see you yelling a question and you don't look great. But most of those people don't understand how hard you've tried, how many months you've been there. I
and
have
that's
a
5 days a week, right? I mean, you're
yes,
7 months, 5 days a week, raising your
yeah,
hand. Nobody's
yeah,
calling on you on purpose. And there's only 49 people in there, so to speak. So
yeah.
it's obvious. Have you been to the jail where the January 6ers are?
No, so so we are doing a project on that. We are launching our new Substack on Monday called the Daily Letter,
Oh, great.
because today News Africa focuses on U.S.-Africa relations. So it's not a great place to write about politics and the U.S.
Right.
So that's why we are launching a Substack where we can focus on January 6th, the 2024 election, President Trump, Biden, and Kennedy, who just announced yesterday that he would like to challenge President Biden.
Yeah, it's
And,
amazing.
yeah.
So you're the only White House correspondent who is not allowed to attend the White House Correspondents' Dinner this month. Does that hurt your feelings, or would you rather not go there anyway?
Yeah, so the Daily Beast did a story on me saying that no, you're not the only White House correspondent. We were able to find other people who will not go, so you shouldn't actually complain but it's like there are hundreds of people who cover the White House, but there are people who are there every single day. People like me, people like Ducey or Fox News, we know them, the people who are there, not the people who show up once in a while, maybe once a year or twice a year. No. So those people may not even remember them. They say, okay, yeah, you want to apply for maybe the White House dinner, or we've sold all the ticket. But the people who are there every day, the people who do the job, people like me, I'm the only one, to my knowledge, who wasn't allowed to attend the dinner. And I don't care about the dinner. Last year, they gave me the worst seat in the room, but it's a place, it allows you to mingle, get to know people in the industry. There are 7,000 people who come for the first time since 2014, since President Obama was there. The president will attend with the first lady, the vice president will attend with the second gentleman. That will be on April 29th of this month. So it's tough.
Yeah. So in 2011, you made this documentary, Nigeria's Wealth Preachers, after exploring money and religion in Nigeria for 5 years. Can you tell us about that?
Yes. So there were some journalists who came all the way from the UK to do a story on religion in Nigeria. I don't know how they got my number, but because I've done different stories, I've been beaten up in a church in Nigeria for trying to do a story. I've been close to, I'm a Christian, and I've been doing that story for many years. And so they came and then we did the story. It was crazy. In Nigeria, religion is, especially in southern Nigeria, religion is big. 70, almost 100 million people see themselves as Christian. And you also have, prosperity pastors who preach and who get money from people and promise them all kinds of stuff, but don't actually do anything. The only people who end up benefiting from it are the pastors. They have private jets, and they have security guards. Some of them have like 10 security guards when they are preaching, and it's crazy. It was like a scam.
Wow.
And I did some stories on that.
Well, happy Easter to you. In 2015, they detained you for they said spying for Boko Haram. Tell us about Boko Haram and what are they up to now, if anything, or are they disbanded. I don't think so.
For those who live in the US who can remember in 2012 when the former First Lady Michelle Obama, she publicly called for the release of the Chibok girls.
Yeah.
And that was in northern Nigeria. Boko Haram is a terrorist organization operating in northern Nigeria, Cameroon, and Chad. They displaced millions of people from Nigeria to Cameroon. Even though I was born in Cameroon, I lived in Nigeria, I studied there. And so in 2015, I received a grant from an organization to go and do an investigative story on Nigerian refugees in Cameroon and Chad. And I got to Cameroon, I was there for a week. And they kept telling me, you will go to the camp tomorrow and next tomorrow. And, I didn't have all the money in the world. So at some point, I decided to go to the camp and know what was going on. And when I got there, they arrested me and accused me of being a spy for Boko Haram. The reason they arrested me was because I was able to speak to the refugees who were there, to pictures, and they live in really horrible conditions. Wow. And they didn't like that. They first released me, and once they were able to retrieve my phone and saw all the videos and the pictures, and they arrested me and accused me of being a spy. I was there for less than a week in the cell. It was horrible. The first day I thought, the next day I'm a journalist. I wasn't doing anything bad. And I'm also from Cameroon, so they will release me. They did not. The second day, the third day, by the fourth day, I began to realize, oh my God, I may actually die here because, they keep you in a cell with virtually no window, and you don't know when it's daytime, you don't have no bathroom, nothing. They even steal your money, and you're in this cell with the real Boko Haram suspect. And they can actually kill you in the cell and nothing will happen since there's a war. And it was a tough time. But
that certainly makes dealing with Jen Psaki and the KJP a walk in the park. But the number of journalists murdered in retaliation for their work more than doubled in 2020 as criminal gangs and militant groups targeted reporters working in violent but democratic nations. I have a journalist, Jonathan Cho, who covers the homeless, and I fear for his safety every day. He's also been, kicked out of pressers by governor and city manager illegally. Globally, at least 30 journalists were killed in 2020. 21 of those were singled out for murder in retaliation for their work. What do you think of the dangers of being a reporter these days, not just in the press briefing?
It's tough. It's tough. The press briefing is actually the least, is the best place for a journalist as far as safety is concerned. You have the Secret Service. It's a no-fly zone, so you don't even have anyone flying, over the White House. But it's tough, journalists face many things: discrimination, attacks. Many are being killed, even in Africa, and many of them are even being detained. In Nigeria, there was a presidential election in February. And as you know, some people were arrested because they said they tweeted something. And so now it's even riskier for a journalist to tweet because you can't really hide. Most people who use the social media, they can hide their identity. They have fake names and fake pictures and fake everything. But if you're a journalist like me, you need to use your picture, your name, and your identity. And so it's so easy for people to target you. Some people attack me, believing that I promote President Trump, and I'm not. I'm just saying that you need to treat people fairly. Whether you like them or you don't like them, whether you wish them never to run again for election, you need to be fair to them. And once I do that and say that the case against him, for instance, is a weak case, I have people attacking me, insulting me, some even trying to know where I live. And so it's dangerous even in the US, but much more dangerous in different places around the world where
Yeah.
journalists are being killed for just doing their job.
Did Stripe, the payment processing company, kick you off at Jen Psaki's urging?
I don't know if it was a Jen Psaki urgent, but it was such a coincidence after we had that big clash on her last day in office in May 2021. 2021, yes. I think a few days after they kicked me off. But then the New York Post did a story on that and they brought me back.
Oh, okay. Well, that's what it
Yeah.
takes, I guess.
Yeah.
Tell us about Today News Africa. How big is your reach in Africa? How many subscribers? Is it free or subscription only? Tell us a little bit about your paper.
Okay, so we don't talk about, for marketing reason, we don't really discuss how many subscribers. We don't go into specifics.
Okay.
But so we are online. We are also in different languages. So if you are reading us in France, for instance, you receive our news in French. If you are reading us in the French speaking part of Cameroon, you receive it in French. If you're in China and you open todaynewsafrica.com, you read your stories directly in your local browser language.
Oh, that's great.
And so, yeah, we have a high reach and it's increasing every day. It's different from, when it's not as high as when we are in the news. Like I was in the news on Fox and everywhere the View attacking me. And so you have millions of people going to decide because you are in the news, because Fox News is talking about you, because you are granting interviews. But then it comes down after the whole, interviews and the whole attacks. But we have a significant amount of people who read us in the US and in many countries in Africa, especially in countries like Ethiopia, because we focused for years on the war between the TPLF and the Ethiopian federal government forces. Eritrea, because they are very active and they don't have a good relationship with the US. And Cameroon, because I come from there. Nigeria also, because we've been focusing on those places and other places. So what Today News Africa focuses on is on US-Africa relations. We don't pretend to cover every single thing that happens in Africa. And
Right.
we don't pretend to cover every single thing that happens in the US.
How do your African readers feel about the way you're being treated here, where they can probably see for themselves during the press briefings if they watch on the C-SPAN or on TV that you are being elbowed out almost daily? Do they think
so most of them can't believe it. Like they don't, what Africans love Americans. Africans love the US. People in Africa look up to the US for democracy, freedom, and everything. And so they can't believe that. Many of them write me, many of them invite me. Those who are in the US, they invite me for dinner and things like that. Some of them subscribe to our publication. Most of them cannot speak publicly also because they work for companies and they don't want to come on Twitter or say something that will affect them. And even in the briefing room, what you realize is after the briefing, I have people who reach out to me, but they can't say anything in the briefing room because they still want to have a good relationship with the press secretary. It's a lonely, it can be really lonely when you do what I've done.
It seems like it would be not a good thing to be on the outs with her. I got about 5 minutes left with you. I want to get through a few things, mostly about Africa. Joe sent Kamala, like you just said, to Tanzania, Zambia, and Ghana. Have you met her, and why did she go?
So mainly to strengthen ties between US and Africa officially. But the real reason is because China is expanding influence and Russia is also expanding influence, although they don't say that publicly. The worst thing is while she was in Ghana, in Zambia, in Tanzania, she had no agenda for China. And, for Africa, the competition between the US and China for the mineral resources of Africa, it's a good thing. But what is happening now? China is taking over everywhere. They are building bridges, roads. The US is almost retreating from Africa. About 3 weeks ago, the head of the US Africa Command, General Lamley, testified in the Senate, and he was asked, what's the greatest threat of the US in Africa? And he said, China. And he gave 3 reasons. One of the reasons was the mineral resources. As you know, about 40% of the mineral resources used by US companies come from Africa. Right now, the Chinese are installing their military bases at strategic locations. In a few years, they'll be able to drive out the US. And that's why I feel misunderstood, because what we are trying to do at Today News Africa is to actually strengthen the ties between US and Africa using reliable and accurate and relevant information. Instead of helping us, they're actually punishing us and helping the Chinese.
Gosh, well, there were 9 labs discovered and 27 deaths so far in Equatorial Guinea, the WHO said, from the Marburg virus. Is there any truth to the news that Bill Gates uses Africa to experiment with his vaccines and genetically modified mosquitoes and whatnot?
So I don't know. I hear those stories all the time. I've not investigated them. But if you lived in Nigeria, you know, there's a big story on Pfizer, one of the experimental vaccine that they did several decades ago that killed and affected many children. That's why if you go to Nigeria, even today, and you mention the name Pfizer, they don't want to have anything to do with you because of that.
That's good. Joe said he'll pull aid from Uganda if they impose death penalty on LGBTQ plus people. Do you think they'll go ahead and do it anyway, regardless of however much money the US wants to send or threaten not to send?
Yeah, they will go ahead because it's a cultural thing. And also, when they impose those sanctions, the president of Uganda will not be affected. Those who will suffer the most are ordinary people that the US is still trying to help.
So for decades, it was a big deal that America not say Turkey committed genocide against Armenians because, you know, big NATO member Turkey didn't want us to, and little Armenia had no clout. Today, Ethiopia is accused of war crimes, but Secretary of State Anthony Blinken said all sides committed war crimes. What do you think of that?
Yes, up till now, the Ethiopian government has not allowed full access to the international media. Right in Ethiopia, they don't trust the US. The federal government of Ethiopia doesn't trust the US, has always believed that the US was trying to reinstall the TPLF, who were in power for almost 27 years. So I believe that both sides may have committed atrocities, but those atrocities were more on the Ethiopian government troop side.
American missionary Jeffrey Woodkey was freed in Niger. Trump had great success freeing a lot of hostages around the world. Are we doing a good job getting our people back, or a bad job, and this is just one fluke of success that we've had in the Biden years?
Yeah, I don't think we are doing a great job, and you are seeing that with the Wall Street Journal journalist who has been held in Russia. Because you need to have connection and relationships with the people if you want to free hostages. But if you are not building relationships with them, and you don't use people like me, in using is giving us the opportunity to do our job and to bring Africa and the US together. You are doing a disservice to the US and to Africa.
Okay. And so are we losing the hearts and minds of Africans who you said love America in the way that we're handling the continent right now, and obviously you, to China?
Yes. If you go to Africa, any country, Cameroon, Nigeria, you see they will treat you there like a king. They will love you, they will give you food, they will clothe you, they will make sure you can stay in their houses. They won't ask you to pay rent or anything. That's how much the US is loved in Africa. But right now, what we realize is the US has stopped investing in Africa. and China is taking over. They're taking over everywhere, buying land, buying ports, building military bases, exploiting mineral resources, building roads, and the US is nowhere to be found. So very soon, the Chinese will take over everywhere, and which is not a good thing for Africa, because in Africa, we still believe in democracy, that people should be free, and the Chinese don't care.
Right. Okay, last question for you. So assuming the KGP stays there for the last year and a half of this administration, and that if Joe does win another 4 years, or if he doesn't win another 4 years and you're still there doing your job, do you think your position as a journalist will get better, or is it going to stay the same and they're just going to continue to shoulder you out? Have you seen any ice breaking or any indication that they may treat you better?
I don't really know. Yesterday and the day before yesterday, I found myself in a restaurant with KJP. And so we find ourselves in this restaurant, and she's looking at me, I'm looking at her, but we've had such a confrontational relationship. We don't know what to say to each other. So I think maybe, never say never. Maybe we'll find a way to... She felt bad also to see someone she sat with in her office and talk and had this conversation. Now we find ourselves in a different place, and we can talk. So
okay. Well, Simon, thank you for your time. Thank you for your reporting. We appreciate you here. We are nearing the end. Please tell our listeners where they can go to find out more about you and follow your social media.
First thing, I want everyone listening now to pray for me. Just pray for me so that I keep doing my job.
God bless you.
Also so that the First Amendment can be respected. Finally, go to my social media, my Twitter at Simon Ateba, SIMONATEBA, or follow us on Substack, dailyletter.com. And
put that in the show notes for sure.
Go to todaynewsafrica.com or at todaynewsafrica.
All right. Well, be safe out there. Keep fighting the good fight. Thanks again for coming on with us.
Thank you for having me.
Now I write songs about the heartland. My heartland's in Tennessee.
Welcome to the Steve and Steve segment of our show, where we cover what we just heard. Producer Steve, we heard a lot. What did you think of our guest, Simon Ateba?
Well, he reminds me of a couple other journalists I've listened to in the past who they literally put their lives on the line. They're trying to get the truth. They're trying to get the readers, the watchers to understand what's really going on in this world. And, having guns put to his head, having spent time in a prison. Boy, I really respect him. And I also respect the fact that he said, we thought, Trump's bad guy. He's, we got to get rid of him. Oh, now we got Biden in there and we got what? Everything that Biden's administration said that they supported, actually, they don't. I'm treated like dirt. And the guys before actually treated me with respect. What's going on here? And I think that's what the reality set in is he just got sold a bill of goods.
Black Lives Matter, right? I mean, isn't he supposed to be listened to and respected and given the time of day? And they won't even do it. It's unbelievable. This is goodbye for a little while. I'm your host, Steve Abramowitz, editor-in-chief of HeartlandJournal.com. If you like what you hear, please subscribe, even while I'm gone, and pass it around, even in reruns. We only grow with your help, and still ad-free. Back in August. Enjoy the reruns. Maybe off air, we'll get that piece in our time. I'll work on it in Europe. Glory to God. At Heartland Journal, we don't just write about the Heartland, we're part of it. Whether you're in Montana cattle country, next to an Idaho data center in a drought, or from an Ohio manufacturing town, this is your platform. Got a story tip? A perspective we need to hear? We want it. This podcast and website exists because readers like you step up. Help us keep the lights on and the reporting honest. Visit heartlandjournal.com or our Substack, Heartland Journal, and subscribe to our ad-free premium content. Together, we're keeping authentic journalism alive in Middle America. I'm Steve Abramowitz, your host of the Heartland Journal podcast. Thanks for listening.
It's a long way to Nashville from that Napa Valley vine. Put me on a road less traveled. Lord, now I I know why. God knew I'd get there in His perfect time.
Heartland Journal Podcast is the media property of heartlandjournal.com, where you can find news stories, commentary, and content serving the heartland of America. Any views or opinions represented on the podcast are personal and belong solely to the creator and do not represent those of the people, institutions, or organizations that the creator may or may not be associated with in professional or personal capacity unless explicitly stated.
Now I write songs about the heartland. My heartland's in Tennessee. Now I write songs about the heartland. My heartland's in Tennessee.